Hi, I'm Jen. I'm a Levi's tailor in California, and today I'll be showing you how to make a supply pouch out of the leg of a pair of jeans. Repurposing jeans that are damaged or that you've grown out of is a great way to practice sustainability, so I'll be showing you how to upcycle those jeans into a useful school supply pouch. To do this customization, this upcycling piece, first you'll need a pair of old jeans. What we're going to be using is the leg. You'll also need some scissors and a seam ripper if you have it. If not, that's fine. A lot of these supplies are based on what you have available and what you like to use, so you can mix and match. For the closure, you'll need some sort of ribbon or string. I happen to have some extra shoelaces, so I'll be using this white shoelace. I'll need a needle and thread. 2 buttons for the closure. You could also just use 1 button. Chalk to mark before you cut the jeans. You could also use a pen or a pencil here if you want. And then you will need a sewing machine. You'll need some paints. I have a spray paint here that's shimmery, metallic, and then I have just a regular acrylic that I'll use with my paintbrush to do the letters. I'm gonna put a name on it. You'll need an X-Acto knife to cut out your stencil. Scissors would work just fine as well. A pen to draw out the letters. And then I will do the actual stencil on a piece of manila paper. Any sort of craft paper or a thick envelope, anything like that would work, or just even regular computer paper if that's what you've got. The first step is that I'm going to open up the hem of this pant leg. I want to open it up and then stitch it back closed more cleanly. If you don't want to go through opening it up, you could just stitch it closed along here and have this bit kind of open. Since this is very sturdy fabric, I'll rip every 3rd or 4th stitch, and then I should be able to kind of just pull it from the back, and that'll pull out a hole, so I don't have to get every single stitch. And you just have that left to tidy up. You can make that a little easier by running a blade of some sort over it. You can run your scissors over it, or you can, if you enjoy it, you can go through and pick them out one by one. Some people like that. Next, I'm going to mark and cut the shape of our eventual supply case. So I pulled out a marker, which this is one of the markers that I'm going to want to fit into that supply case later on. So I'm using this to figure out how long my supply case needs to be. I have to consider the fact that there will be a seam here, and that, you know, I want this to be a little bit longer than the marker so that it can easily cover them. So I'll be thinking here, and then I want them to stick out a little bit at the top. So there. I'm just going to draw myself a line that curves down and around. This will be kind of the bucket that these will sit in. They'll peek out just a little bit, and this will eventually be the flap that folds down over them. Now that I've drawn my basic shape, I'm just going to cut it out, and this will be the part that I work with from now on. Once I stitch this together, this flap will fold over here. See? So I'm okay with this being a little imperfect. I kind of like that something that we have upcycled is going to retain some of its original character. My next move is going to be to stitch along this area. So to do that, you can stitch on the outside if you want, especially if you didn't bother to open up your hem seam. I'm going to turn it inside out. You can and maybe should use pins, arguably should use pins, but I'm not going to. I like to avoid the step of pins whenever possible. I want my stitch length to be about 3 or 4. Doesn't have to be super tight. I want it just to be a straight stitch. And I'm just going to hold it carefully in place as I stitch. I'm just going to put some stitching along this edge here, and make those corners turn in, then I'll be able to clip them and it'll turn a little bit easier. When I'm doing stuff like this, I like to go a little back stitch crazy because I just don't want these corners to come undone. I'll clip these ends. I'm going to clip these corners and turn it back right side out. Finish the opening with a decorative stitch. You could use some sort of zigzag stitch or leave the edge raw here, but a lot of the home machines have these different decorative stitches, so I'm just going to choose a fun one. I'll test it on another piece of fabric first just to make sure that the stitch looks decent, and then I will start at one of the seams and use that stitch all the way around. You'll want to move a little bit slower than normal stitching because these decorative stitches take a little longer and you don't want to rush the machine. You'll end up with the stretched out stitch and it won't look as nice. I'm going to try this spray paint now. I'll shake it first. I put down some craft paper here just to protect my table, but you could do this outside. Ready to go, I hope. Ooh, still getting it off of. Gonna have to wipe that down better later. Whoops. Well, let that be a lesson to me and you and everyone. Just before we get started, I'm not gonna cut these completely all the way out. I'm gonna leave. So I'm not gonna cut that. Not gonna cut that. Not gonna cut that. Good to mark it so you don't forget and just get lost in doing it. Let's do this. The better it is now, the easier it'll be later. So I'm not going to be using these letters at all. So I can, to get them out of my way, clip them off so I can see a little bit better what's kind of going on with it. All right, time to sew these buttons on. I marked these two little spots where I want the buttons to sit. I'm just going to loop through here, and then loop through here to dust it off. Just gonna go back and forth over this button a bunch of times. Well, that was one. Time to do the next one. Okay, so I'm going to now do the last little bit and attach the shoelace. I don't need the whole thing. I probably only need about maybe a third of it. Yeah, that'll work. So I'm just gonna trim it. I'm just going to lock in at the end here. Where I want this to sit. So I'm going to just create a little X back and forth to hold it securely and in a way that looks kind of nice on this front edge so that what you're seeing doesn't look sloppy. So I will stitch back and forth. I want to make sure that I'm catching both the back of this and ending up generally where I would like it to be on the front. So that looks pretty good. This is not a complicated stitch, but I do want to pay attention to the way it's laying to make sure that it looks decent once it's done. Okay. So we just have a little X, which is nothing, I mean, it's nothing fancy, but just, I want to be intentional about the hand stitching I'm doing on here because you're going to see it. So I will Just tie off the stitch on the back then and sink it through that shoelace. And voila. You've got nice and stitched down in an intentional way so that it can close up. So we have successfully customized and upcycled a supply pouch, and this will definitely be used here for some of the art supplies in Lily's room. But what I'd like to talk about are the simple skills that kids as young as elementary school age can use and practice to kind of build their confidence with sewing and repairing. Specifically for things like buttons, they're very simple to sew on, and it's a great thing for kids to learn how to do, to be able to do for themselves when they're older. Things like ripping out seams, and for slightly older kids, like using a machine to sew a straight line, and then the motivator of being able to customize it and make it something that's theirs and that's personal. These are all great skills for kids to start building. So this should be something that you're able to do at home, and I would love to see if anybody makes one, how they turn out.